The flight of David Saint-Jacques' life is almost at hand. Just final checks of his Soyuz capsule and his equipment are all that's left. 2 years of rigorous training has prepared him well for his first trip into space. But it's still hard not to be nervous, especially after what happened to the last Soyuz crew.
There are risks at every launch. So therefore, yeah, of course we have butterflies, as we say, but what's the solution to that? Just to train more.
In October, the last Soyuz mission ended after less than 2 minutes when the booster rockets failed to separate properly. Turns out, the problem was a sensor. A small piece of metal was damaged by workers when the rocket was assembled. The American and Russian on board landed safely, not far from the launch site, but it was a crushing setback for Russia's already beleaguered space program.
Thankfully, the engineers around the world have been working very hard to make sure that we go to the bottom of the investigation of what happened in the previous launch. We're very confident now that we know what happened, and we've found ways to make sure it does not happen again.
Russians are very proud of their successes in space. Saint-Jacques and his wife Veronique acknowledged that with a visit to Yuri Gagarin's grave in Red Square. The first man to orbit the Earth is one of Russia's greatest heroes. But of late, Russia's space failures have dominated the headlines, particularly its cargo-carrying rockets. This 2013 crash of a Proton M was caused by guidance instruments that workers installed upside down. Then there's the mysterious hole discovered in the Russian orbiter on the International Space Station recently. Russian officials first seemed to suggest sabotage, but it's clear the hole was drilled on Earth, and then someone tried to cover up their mistake. The worry is Russia's long-running production and mechanical troubles may finally be affecting spacecraft that carry people.
I'm afraid currently we are not a reliable partner for the United States and for Europeans.
Pavel Luzin wrote his PhD thesis on Russian space policy, and he studied the industry intensely.
I see decline. I see the long-term crisis that is based on our inability to adapt our economics, adapt our scientific policy for contemporary world.
We met Luzin in the central Russian city of Perm, where he teaches at the local university. The city still looks a lot like it did in Soviet days when it was off limits because of the rockets that were made for civilian and military use. The industry still employs more than 7,000 people here today. Luzin says protecting those jobs by limiting would-be competitors is a priority for Russia's space agency and the Putin government.
Russia's space industry still works like a Soviet space industry and doesn't able to work in market environment. It is able to work only in environment where government is the only consumer, and when government pays a lot of money for maintaining of all these manufacturing facilities, for maintaining of all these people.
For the next year at least, the U.S. space program needs Russia. Its Soyuz rockets are the only way up to the International Space Station, and NASA pays Russia handsomely for the ride, $80 million a seat. But the plan is to shift the jobs to private companies, such as SpaceX, which have been testing cheaper, reusable rockets, and that will leave Russia's space agency Roscosmos without its biggest source of private revenue.
Everyone wants to be like SpaceX.
Russia's trying to meet that challenge here. This is Skolkovo. It's a high-tech park that opened 7 years ago and looks a lot like what you'd see in Silicon Valley, with young IT workers zipping around on scooters and playing ping pong on their breaks. There are 50 space-related startups here in a so-called space cluster, including Sputniks. It's a company that makes small satellites. It has 2 in orbit now, which staff members monitor from these computers.
So if you really want...
Ivan Koznikov's job is to work with Roscosmos to get funding for Russia's space entrepreneurs. And at times, he says, it feels like one of the toughest jobs on Earth.
Big part of people, of technical people inside of Roscosmos, They have a mindset of back in Apollo days. There is always a rule: if something works, don't touch it. And you have the systems and the components that were running for 50 years already. Okay, they're performing good, don't touch it.
Roscosmos does have big plans. We saw some of them at a recent trade show. There's a new heavy-lift rocket in development called Angara, a new crew capsule that could eventually orbit the moon called Federation. Plus, it's building a new launch facility in Vostochny in Russia's Far East. But in 10 years, Angara has only launched twice, and it's uncertain when Federation will be ready. Delays and production troubles have pushed Krunichev, Russia's largest rocket manufacturer, to the brink of bankruptcy. Without a change in attitude and mandate, Koznikov worries Russia's Roscosmos will keep falling behind.
They have to deliver the product to the state, first of all, and all the other tasks are secondary. And sometimes I think there is not enough money to both comply with, to meet the requirements of state program and to support the private space initiative.
You've been in here before, have you? Many times?
Yes, many times, and approximately 6 months.
6 months, yes, a long time. Yelena Kondakova has a special place in Russian society. She is one of only 4 women cosmonauts. She's a hero of Russia. At Moscow's Space Museum, she showed us around a mock-up of the old Mir space station, where she spent 6 months in orbit in 1995.
Tea, bread, juice, bread.
Was it good? Tasty?
I don't like the bread.
Now retired, she believes the fact that American and Russian astronauts survived the most recent Soyuz incident is a positive development, as it shows proven Russian technology can still be trusted.
То, что наша техника не подводит, и последние события, когда у нас сработала система катапультирования, система аварийного спасения, только лишний раз подтвердила о надежности нашей техники. Вот это меня удивляет, что столько лет, и мы все еще хорошо работаем.
Exploring space, she says, is too expensive for any single country to take on alone, which ensures Russia will continue to have a big role to play.
Больше финансирования, было больше, наверное, еще больше сотрудничества у нас в космосе, потому что те программы, которые и американская сторона, европейская и российская заявляют на будущее, те же самые полеты на Луну, полеты на Марс, они могут пройти только в кооперации со всеми странами вместе.
We met up with Canada's David Saint-Jacques on a sunny day in Moscow before the Soyuz mishap. Then, as now, he expressed confidence in Russia's reliability as a partner.
I think it's a great moment in the history of human spaceflight because there's so many new avenues opening. There are so many other ways to go to orbit that are coming up, and people are now shifting their gaze to going back to the moon and then eventually to Mars. And with all these players, I think we have a really bright future.
Right now, all of Russia's space energies are focused on ensuring Saint-Jacques and his fellow Russian and American crew members on that December flight get up to the International Space Station safely. Neither he nor Russia's Roscosmos have any room for error. Chris Brown, CBC News, Moscow.